Let's then move to your job. Now you work at a bank. So it's, your field specifically, it's fintech. So what are applications that you personally implemented or you saw working well in this field?
Uh, yes, I currently work at the bank, um, and I personally work a lot in the area of suspicious activity
Mm-hmm.
monitoring. And if we talk about use cases specific for fintech, uh,
Mm-hmm.
this is one of them. So monitoring clients' activity for any suspicious activities. Um, you also have things like credit score and risk assessment, chatbots for internal or external use, regulatory compliance. So you can have certain regions of the world, you need to have some system in place that do X, Y, and Z, and this is regulated by the regulatory corpus of that country or that continent and so on. And banks can solve these types of problems through an AI ML system. Um, Financial management, so managing the funds that you have for your clients. Um, I've been mainly involved in, I would say, these two. So these two meaning the activity monitoring and the financial management, but
Mm-hmm.
highly into the activity monitoring part.
And how widespread do you feel these solutions are in the field right now, or is there still like a lot of room for, um, integrating them, implementing them, or they are quite often used already?
These two specific areas.
No, in fintech, how much of it is already like integrated with AI and it
With
works
AML.
well?
Um, I think huge room for improvement.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm,
when you say fintech in general, you don't say big tech, you don't say Google, Meta. So the IT dynamic in general, it's not that doesn't have the same speed, and because of regulation, because of
mm-hmm,
risks and so on, you cannot move at the same speed. So things are not yet where they can be in terms of adoption,
mm-hmm.
um, and everything is highly regulated, and you have to pretty much make a good case how and why this thing will work, and if you that you won't violate any internal or external rules. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think there is still a lot of room in this area, and that's also one of the reasons why I'm in this area. There are
Mm-hmm,
a lot of
mm-hmm.
things to be done.
Yeah, yeah. And have you ever personally participated in this process of negotiation with business that, it will bring huge improvement and we should do that, and you like digged into these documents of theirs, their regulation to understand how to adjust your solution, for example?
Yes, I'm part of this type of communications all the time, because once you have a solution for a business problem and you, let's say, implement it for a specific region, in the first place you had discussions with that region explaining how you will improve that business process, and you get agreed, and then you want to extend this new benefit to other regions, and then you present the same case to that specific region, and you have to convince business also there that this is beneficial for them, and of course with the necessary adaptation because regions are very different and different requirements and so on. So from the business side, it's continuous communication. From the audit side, the same story, because initially
Mm-hmm.
you need approval for any type of MLAI in fintech, especially in banks, And that doesn't stop when you get approved, because over time, of course, you change functionality, you add functionality, and everything you do, it's still regulated and it's still checked yearly, and you still have to document it very well and explain it very well to both technical and non-technical audiences. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, communication never stops for both areas, business and audit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's talk then about your fraud detection case. That unwanted user behavior you mentioned, and you have a case on Escapol platform describing your solution for fraud detection. So could you please go through the process of how it was created, like how the management came to you and asked for it in the first place, or was it your initiative? I was surprised that you said that you volunteer a lot as an engineer to solve certain problems you see that could benefit from ML. How the discussion went, what was like initially proposed, what it turned out to be at the end, and how it all developed.
Um, sure. So just as extra information, this is the thing that I most recently worked on, but in the machine learning AI field, I worked on way more things,
Mm-hmm.
and diversified tasks and projects and so on. And this area of suspicious activity monitoring, it's pretty, let's say, hard to talk about in detail, um,
Mm-hmm.
because of the security risks.
Mm-hmm.
But I can focus on, yeah, the interactions, uh, especially for Europe and Western countries in Europe. This is also a mandatory requirement. So
Mm-hmm.
if we go back to when I mentioned that you can solve business problems in two ways. You either identify them yourself as the person that can match a business problem with a machine learning use case, or business coming to you with an idea and saying, can machine learning do something for me in this case? This was the happier case when business came to us and said, we really need to do this because it's an European requirement, and we need to monitor this type of activity. So that was the initial interaction with business, and this very initial interaction was not necessarily done by me because I wasn't present in the project at the moment. Um, but this is how it started,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, then of course, uh, as I previously stated, the steps. You have the problem. You realize that yes, it can be solved with machine learning. We can do this for sure. We go to the second step. Is there any data? What data? Where can we get the data from? Uh, Basically identifying what's relevant for this problem. And you can imagine that a lot of things can be relevant. So the actual amount of a transaction, your history with the bank, your profile as a client overall, many things. Just make sure that everything that you see relevant for the machine learning algorithm has a business foundation. Because maybe I
Mm-hmm.
consider that, I don't know, your last month spending, it's a relevant feature, a relevant column for my algorithm, but business says probably that's not relevant. Maybe look at something else. So it's also about, yeah, matching, making sure you match the approach to the business problem you try to solve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what together that's relevant? But also, how often is it upgraded? Because users invent certain ways to overcome this barriers all the time. Unfortunately, in this fraud field. So how often do you have to revise the solution, or is it like a routine process, or is on demand process? When something happens, you intervene.
Yes. So we in general, you want to tackle this problem from multiple sides. Of course, you have your, let's say, annual research, where you see, is there anything better I can use to solve my problem in terms of the algorithm itself, which has probably a higher chance to catch things. And then you also have, um, I would say, a system that's built to try to satisfy multiple conditions at once. And what I mean by that, so usually you don't want to be very strict with the things that you, in this specific use case, again, very use case specific, you don't want to be very strict and uh, notify about just a few things that you noticed. You want to detect multiple things, or things that don't have such a high probability of being relevant, but at the same time making sure you don't overload uh, the bank workers, because still you have persons that are involved in this process. So you
Mm-hmm.
make the detections, you then give them to special teams that can review them as part of the review
Mm-hmm.
process. uh, and here it's a balance, so I'll try to detect all the things I can detect that are just slightly suspicious or abnormal, but taking into account that I need to not overload this team or the persons involved in this process.
Mm-hmm.
And another angle to tackle this problem of how the things adapt over time from the client's perspective comes from them, because there is a feedback loop
Mm-hmm.
uh, where we can see, like, how much was relevant, how much was not relevant. Maybe with other processes they managed to identify something that was not identified by the machine learning part, and they analyze that case and see if we can take it into account into the machine learning algorithm. But usually when you build this type of system, you build it taking into account a lot of cases, and you try to attack the same problem from many many angles. So looking at you as an individual, looking at the entire uh, client base, looking at similar group of clients. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
So you mean
there
the
are,
comparison how normal your behavior is in certain context, like in your individual context, in your social group context. Mm-hmm.
yes, and you have a lot of dimensions to to deal with, but we include them to make sure. Uh, and so far, in the years I've been working on this type of project and technologies, there wasn't any uh, main drift that was not caught. So it's a pretty
Mm-hmm.
robust system.
But also, how different is that from one financial institution to another? Can you just easily go and implement the same thing somewhere else, or it's a lot of context-related thing to consider that are different from one company to another?
There will be a lot of differences, especially at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the process and at the beginning. So maybe the same type of approach, similar algorithms will work, but you'll probably have different databases, different data sources, cloud, local, uh, different data altogether, different features, columns, and so on. Then maybe at the middle of the process is where things start to become similar. So how you process the data, how you apply a machine learning algorithm, and then at the end of the process, it's where things are again different, because you have different internal systems where you can put the results. You can have different databases where you can put the result, and so on. And how you deploy, what's available. Maybe some financial institutions work with
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
cloud from Amazon, some work with cloud from Google. Um can be many differences.
So
And
it's both, yeah. Sorry.
yeah, and if data is very different in terms of the structure, so how much data and what type of features or columns, we just call them features, uh, even the middle part of the chain, the algorithm cannot be the same because you are in a complete new context and you need to adapt the algorithm to that context data. So again, it depends.
Yeah, there is always a lot of things to consider about the environment. I once integrated a third-party solution that did this unwanted behavior check, yeah, on their side, and even we had to do a lot of things on our side to make it work with our user data. But there was not financial like company. We had, let's say, a community that. Yeah, that we wanted to keep friendly and yeah, pleasant for every participant. So we wanted to quickly detect and delete some assaultive things people like to share when they are not in a very good mood, let's say. But we also had this automated element where if the system is like 80% sure something is an assault, it just we automatically deleted it. Do you have what in this solution some of these mechanisms that act in a more rapid way than human check, which is always present, but yeah, so it just, I don't know, blocks anything real quick, and then a human rechecks it to make sure it was, yeah, it was right. Okay. Yeah.
So as you mentioned, yeah, these things exist, but in banks or financial institutions, again, it depends on the regulation because usually you're not allowed to let machine learning algorithm take decisions without human check at this point. Maybe it will be different in 5 years from now. So the short answer specific for financial institutions will probably be no, uh, because you don't want to, I don't know, block a transaction or an account or alert a client without probable cause and then to realize it was nothing serious. And of course it can involve reputation and other types of problem. um,
So there is not enough trust yet to.
uh, no, and realistically speaking, machine learning in or AI in general, it's not 100% error proof. Even if you look at the well-known large language models which are developed and trained by big corporations and they invest probably billions already, um, you still have hallucination, and they still you ask about how apples are made and might throw some information about oranges. um, so it's not something error proof, and even if you have a system that's 99% accurate in its predictions, at the moment there is still, especially in the financial system, this audit corpus that says 1% mistakes, it's a high risk for us. Let's not go that route. Let's double check everything. Which in some cases it's nice and it's normal. So I wouldn't want my account blocked for a wrong reason anyways. So
Yeah,
it can
I
be.
asked because it's a quite common situation when you come to another country, you make a transaction and suddenly your card is blocked. That's why I thought that you had much more freedom, but probably it's not related to ML. It's just very simple rule that if a transaction is from
Yes.
another country, it's blocked
You
automatically.
also have, yeah, of course. As I said, because there is a lot of room for improvement in the financial system with this type of technology, um, you also have a lot of rules at the moment, so not everything is solved by algorithms. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, sure. But also, you mentioned that you volunteered some ideas. Maybe you'd like to share other cases outside of this fraud detection. You volunteered yourself and you probably saw um, very good reason for it.
Sure. So still in the financial sector, you of course have the the management of assets part. So you can, based on the client, recommend things to invest in, different products, different portfolios, and so on. This is not suspicious activity related, like having a score, credit score, and risk assessment for loans. It's another
Mm-hmm.
use case. Chatbots, which can be especially useful internally, because financial institutions usually have a lot of documentation about a lot of processes. Everything is very structured, and let's say you have a new joiner in the bank. It doesn't matter if it's technical or business, and you want to bring him up to speed with everything, and how every process works, what he needs to do, and so on, how the bank operates. And you can have all this information gathered from all the documents, where he or she would probably have to go and click and read for hours or days, and put that into a chatbot and allow that chatbot to answer questions, and that new employee just say, so it's a onboarding use case. How do
Mm-hmm.
I set up my laptop for as a relationship manager? How do I connect to this application? And then the chatbot
Mm-hmm.
searches in that entire knowledge base, and is able to provide an answer. And the risks are less than, let's say, having a chatbot with the final client, because then
Mm-hmm.
you have to mitigate some type of questions and so on. It can get complicated, but also chatbots are seem to be very useful at the moment.
Have you ever created one?
I implemented, actually, from scratch, the architecture that's bigger than just the chatbot. Um, and here we can get into a pretty dangerous technical discussion, um,
We're always
because
at the edge of it, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
chatbots and LLMs. So chatbot is just another version of a large language model, which I will refer to as LLM, uh, for speed. um, this was derived from a different type of deep learning architecture, which was solving translation problems. So you had a huge type of architecture which was solving, translating from French to English, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then someone realized that if you take just a part of that neural architecture and reuse it, as I was talking about modularity of deep learning and how you can configure things way easier than in machine learning, but you need to know what to configure and how. Um, they realized that taking just the second part of this architecture will help you generate text, and that's how LLM started. Um, and me myself, I implemented from scratch to make sure I understand the concepts, the entire architecture. So let's say the translation architecture, and then I used in different scenarios, yes, chatbots and large language models implemented by, but you don't need at this point to implement it from scratch. You need to be horrible and you lose a lot of time. Um, you can reuse them pretty efficiently and easily with minimal code, if you know what they can do and how to connect them to the things that they need. So yes, I also been in close contact to this side of our field, uh, both at the company and outside hackathons. I won one hackathon with a similar solution here in Romania. Um, so yeah, it's a pretty nice experience.
Okay.